Welcome to our Seeing Through Photographs Study Center session. I'm Sarah Meister. I'm a curator in the Department of Photography, as I think most of you know by now. I'm joined here by River Bullock, my colleague who is the Beaumont and Nancy Newhall Curatorial Fellow at MoMA in the Department of Photography, and Tasha Lutek, who is our collection specialist, and who, if you've joined any of our study center sessions before, Tasha actually runs our real study center when that happens. So thank you, Tasha and River, for joining me today to talk about Gordon Parks.
Hi, all. So happy to be here with you.
Thanks for having me.
We're glad you're here too. So this is a really big group for us for a study center session. We have more than 270 people. Well, yeah, more than 270 people so far. And we're also, as always, going to try something new today. So as I've mentioned before, the Seeing Through Photographs Study Center sessions are recorded. So this will be recorded. We can communicate with one another through the chat. I also have two colleagues in education, or three colleagues in education actually, who are reading through the chat. And if there's a question that comes, it's really best amongst yourselves, but something comes up in there they want to bring to our attention, they will. The Q&A function is a terrific way for you to let us know a question that's on your mind that we can pause and answer. And we're trying something new today, which is that at various points, I will see if anyone wants to raise their hand and talk with us about something that's on their mind. This was the first study center session where we gave you readings in advance, and we want to give ourselves an opportunity to talk about those readings with you if any of you would like to do that. So Travis, would you mind queuing up the slideshow? We thought we'd begin with a little bit of context about Gordon Parks, about a recent acquisition that we've made and some projects that River and Tasha and I are all working on that are coming up this fall, specifically around Gordon Parks' story for Life magazine called The Atmosphere of Crime. So welcome everyone. Travis, would you mind going to the next slide, please? So in 1957, Gordon Parks, who was a staff photographer for Life magazine, he was the first Black staff photographer for Life magazine. His first photo essay published there was in 1948 called Harlem Gang Leader. This story that he made in 1957 called The Atmosphere of Crime, and you see the first page of Parks's photo essay there on the bottom right. This was a really important photo essay both for Parks and for Life magazine in 1957. And it was part of a series that Life magazine had decided to dedicate to considering crime in the US. So the picture on the top right shows you Parks's photograph on the left and the intro to the overall series of articles on the right that came out 6 weeks, one after the other in 1957. September 9th, 1957 was the first one of these. And this is the Gordon Parks Foundation ever since Gordon Parks' death in 2006, have been working on partnering with institutions, mostly museums, on thinking about various bodies of work by Gordon Parks that could be featured and brought to light, added more depth, more context around them. And when we, MoMA, have been talking with the Parks Foundation, this particular series, The Atmosphere of Crime, was always something that we felt was particularly significant, that we wanted to grapple with as an institution. Can you mind going to the next slide, Travis? In part, that was because the museum owned this print since 1993, a gelatin silver print, black and white, of raiding detectives in Chicago, Illinois from this story. Now, it was a big gelatin silver print. If you look at the size there, 12 3/8 by 7 7/16. So that's like this big. So it has a real presence on the wall, but you'll notice that it was made in black and white. And I always thought that was intriguing, that for this photo story that appeared in Life magazine in color, this photograph, when it came into the museum, a very early large gelatin silver print, was black and white. course, that has a lot to do with the economics of printing at the time. It was a big investment for Life magazine to be making this photo story in color. It was an expression of how important they thought it was and how much confidence they had in Parks as a photographer. But when Parks himself was printing from these negatives, he was printing them in black and white. I also think it's interesting to note that this print was given by the artist in 1993 in honor of Edward Steichen. Edward Steichen had been the director of the Department of Photography at MoMA for many years, between 1947 and 1961. And Steichen, and that was a really, so I had always wondered, was it that Parks and Steichen had a very close relationship, maybe one that I didn't know? And so when we started talking about acquiring the set of color prints for the museum, I reached out to the Gordon Parks Foundation and I said, do you have any context for what was the relationship between Parks and Steichen? Why would he have wanted to give this print in honor of Steichen? And they responded in a way that made me, actually made me quite sad. And it was because in 1993, when the museum went to Parks to acquire this and a handful of other photographs from him, when my colleagues at MoMA, my predecessors at MoMA, asked him to name a price for these photographs that we wanted to acquire, he simply didn't know how to price them. There hadn't been an established market for his work. And so to deflect or avoid that circumstance, he decided to give them to the museum in honor of Edward Steichen, which was a really a nice and very generous thing to do. But it does bring forward some important questions of what that means, that a photographer who was as established as Parks was by that point in 1993, that he would have had no metrics through which he could establish the value of his work. And I know it's something that in our office hours, we've talked about, a number of us, like, how do you assign value? How do you set a market for yourself as a photographer, as an artist? But this is something that gives me pause. Travis, would you mind going to the next slide? So we're going to be talking today about a number of pictures from this series. We're just going to show you a few to give you a little feel for it. These are 3 series. These were all acquired by the museum in late 2019. So what happened was we thought about how important this series was. We had acquired a number of works by Gordon Parks in 1993, and since then, fortunately, in the subsequent acquisitions, we were appropriately compensating at least the foundation for those prints in a way. And then in late last year, while we were working on this book, okay, I can't tell, yeah, there, now I see it, which is, thanks, River, which is a book about this series of work. The museum purchased a full set of modern color prints from this series, including these 3. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this one. And again, we're going to return to these, but I just want to let you have sort of a visual on the series. And the next one. And one more. It's such a great series. And at the time that we purchased those color prints, the Gordon Parks Foundation actually gave us this print, which I consider to be the kind of counterpoint to the photograph that had been in the museum's collection since 1993. So you'll recognize it in color on the cover of the book. This is another early gelatin silver print that Parks made that's also quite big. You see it's more than 19 inches high. One more, please, on the slides. Okay, this is from the end of the book. And one more. Oh, did we not? Is that it for the, sorry, one more, please, Travis. Sorry, I can't remember exactly what we had as the next slide. Okay, so we can go back, Travis, to this one, if you wouldn't mind. That's in black and white. So, perfect. So obviously, this particular body of work, we knew how important it was. We knew that it was something that we wanted to grapple with. We invited Gordon Parks, the Gordon Parks Foundation and I, while we were working on this book, I wrote one essay in it. we also invited Brian Stevenson and Nicole Fleetwood to write essays as well, to bring their perspectives and expertises to bear on this. And for those of you who were really ambitious, you may have read those essays that we put up on the Seeing Through Photographs course on Thursday. So if not, there's always time, you can read it later. But we, in addition to this, and then I'm going to invite some questions from you all, either through questions or chat, or you can raise your hand if you want to talk it through. But the one thing I wanted to mention is, obviously in the United States in recent weeks, this idea of crime and criminality and policing and the role of photography in representing so-called criminal actions or in putting forward what it means to be representing police work, these have taken on an added urgency. And we are particularly interested in bringing forward Parks's achievement from 1957 and to understanding its significance today. So that is one of my goals for the day, and Tasha and River, I think, share that with me, is to really think through, what does this series mean today? What does publishing this book mean today? Even though we had been working on it, I mean, we were actually very lucky, in fact, that the book was printed before COVID really shut down Europe, because it was printed in Europe. And that we have this now as a tool through which we can think through these issues. In addition, River and I are working on an installation that will go on view sometime later this year when the museum reopens, that takes this body of work and this particular acquisition from the story as a point of departure and uses it as a catalyst for thinking about other work in the museum collection, whether it's 19th century photographs of mugshots or work that just preceded this. If you think of someone like Ouija, who photographed crime and criminality in New York in the 1940s. So we'll get to all of that. But what I would love is to begin by asking any of you if you have questions or thoughts based on the readings that you may have done. Those two articles that we shared, one in Spanish, which was so great. We were thrilled that El País was interested in this story. The other one in the Atlantic, which is an esteemed, there have actually been a handful, but those were two of my favorite. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I couldn't read the one in Spanish, but the interviewer, she asked really good questions and I was happy to answer them in English. And I believe that she probably translated them well, but maybe you all want to weigh in on that. So please feel free to raise your hand, and one of our Crackerjack AV team will call on you, or you can submit a question through the chat or through Q&A, and we'll try to answer it. I think, is somebody unmuted? You have to sort of look for yourselves. If you raised your hand and wanted to be unmuted, just start talking.
Hi.
Hi. Is this Albania? Whoop, no. Who is this speaking? Okay. I heard somebody else's voice that I know wasn't Tasha or River.
Yes, that's me.
Hi.
Hi, nice to finally meet you, I guess.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Of course, I love it. I try to keep up as much as I can. So I am not able to turn on the video, but here I am. So my question is, correct me if I'm wrong, but in one of the articles on the course Seeing Through Photographs, I remember reading that Gordon Parks was sort of offended by the fact that this picture, the one that we just talked about on title, was cropped for it to fit correctly in the magazine, right?
Well, I will say Gordon Parks, the Life magazine was known for their, let's just say, overly aggressive cropping practices.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I'm holding it up here. Can you see how narrow this is? This is
Yes.
This is from Life magazine. And this is how it appeared there. So it is,
Oh,
yes, in Life magazine,
like that.
you can see it was quite cropped, very narrow. Similarly, I should say, the picture that we were looking at earlier, which is really a horizontal image, was cropped to be a vertical also in the magazine. So you are absolutely correct that Parks, especially early in his career, he's on record with the, here, just so you can compare it. Well, actually, look at that, and then we'll come back to it.
Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah, it's very dramatic. So
really
just
dramatic.
a slice of that was cropped out. And it is true that that when Life magazine did this, especially early in his career, and this is best documented, I would say, with the Harlem Gang Leader series, Parks really did object to the new meanings that were created by those croppings, different sort of, that shifted Parks's own meaning and intent. The difference with this particular story, I would say, is that I have never read a comment by Parks that he feels that his goals for the story were impacted in a negative way by those croppings. So Parks, by this time, he had been working for Life magazine for more than a decade. He understood what it meant, what that arrangement was. The editors respected him highly. They trusted him with this most important color lead story for the series of articles. And he understood in exchange that the work that he would be handing in, which of course, one other thing that's remembered, Travis, can you come back to me for this? This isn't a sample, this is what he would have given Life magazine. He would have submitted sheets of slides to them. So Parks understood that they were going to be editing his work. And I would say by 1957, when he felt that his meaning wasn't being shifted by those croppings, he had made peace with the editing and the sort of photo layout process of Life magazine. We know certainly other artists for whom they wouldn't have worked with Life magazine because of that practice. So it's an interesting question of when, there are some artists where cropping is tantamount to just destroying their whole artistic intent. And then there are others where Parks had a very solid relationship with Life magazine, and one that by 1957, I think involved a lot of respect in both directions. River, I don't know if you can see some of the questions on the Q&A, but maybe in addition to sharing some of your own thoughts, you want to pick one or two of those to answer?
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad you're here. It's actually, yeah, I like thinking about that.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think one other, when people reflect on this particular story in Life magazine, one thing that comes up is how interesting it is that the work is made in color, and his decision to make the series that way, and his use of available light to produce what really are atmospheric photos. So the title of the story being The Atmosphere of Crime, and the way that Parks maintains a sort of anonymity to the perceived criminal, at the same time that there are images where the police work is really shown with great clarity. So Nicole Fleetwood talks about this quite a bit in the essay that was shared with you. So one of the questions that was coming in is sort of like, why were the works in color, and then why are we seeing them in black and white in these other instances? And I don't have a particular quote, maybe Sarah does, as to Parks articulating the use of color in this story, but it feels as though he's really using color to create a specific mood that addresses this sort of ambiguous space wherein our own biases may come out to perceive this sort of line of criminality, wherein something as simple as being on the street can be perceived as criminal. So thus criminalizing race, criminalizing poverty, these other things that are coming up. And so also sort of in response to Sarah's point about 1957 being a moment in Park's career where he was sort of given the latitude to create the images here that he felt were important to make on this subject. So then returning to the point of why do we have these other black and white instances, what I've understood anecdotally at least is that at the time it was too expensive to produce his own color prints of the series, and so the prints that we have from the series made during Parks' lifetime are gelatin silver prints made from the slides that he produced while he was working on the story. There's another question just in terms of availability of the book itself, and Sarah can attest that yes, the book is available already on Amazon, for example, but will be on MoMA's bookstore very, very shortly. So if we can't share yeah, if we're not able to share the link with you today, we can shortly. So
yeah, thank you. So I'm going to answer a few of the questions, just like to go through them and answer them live because I see them. So Gary Matheson asked, do I have an email where you can reach me? And the best way to reach me is on that Seeing Through Photographs Sarah's forum. I check that regularly. Send me whatever you want there. I'm happy to look at that. So thank you. Anne Maxwell asked what kind of I'm just doing a speed round just to get a few out of the way so we can go. Anne Maxwell asked what kind of camera was he using? Did it require a tripod, or was it a camera he could carry and use without a tripod? And for this series, Parks used a number of different cameras throughout his life. He was actually an incredibly accomplished fashion photographer where he would use a larger format camera. This particular photo story was made with a handheld camera. Color slide film was not particularly sensitive to light. And that atmosphere that River was talking about, that he uses that ambiguity, that blur, that grain to kind of bring forward a destabilizing influence on our approach to the work. How can he invoke a sense of uncertainty? In other words, how are your expectations almost subverted by using available light, by the shadow that might be cast over an alleged criminal's face? Or how does he use the cropping, like with those hands outside of the prison bar, to give that anonymity, to respect the anonymity of those accused of crimes, in counterpoint, as River mentioned, to the very, very specific way in which he looked at policing and police work. So, but all of this was done without a tripod. And I will say the clearest example, the pictures in the book are often quite, there's a sense of indistinct, they have a lot of grain because they're made with natural light in whatever circumstance he was in. The one counterpoint to that are these pictures of a heroin addict shooting up that are extraordinarily delicately lit, and they have this precision to them that's really rare in the series. And when you read Parks's biographies, you read that in fact, that situation was not one that Parks encountered on his daily beat with the detectives, but was something that one of the detectives essentially gave some heroin to one of the people in at the precinct. So, which is an incredibly complex thing of he's offering to sort of set up and foster and further and encourage this addiction so that Parks could get the picture. But again, yes, this series in particular, we believe was made with I don't know if it's a Leica camera, but a 35 millimeter camera with color slide film in it. And he did not use a tripod for that. Ricky Sanders writes, what you describe as troubling having to do, yes, what you describe as troubling having to do with race, class, and privilege. Did the museum consider setting up a scholarship in Gordon Parks' honor instead of just accepting the gift, rather than just accepting the gift in honor of Edward Steichen? I mean, the short answer to that is no. They didn't think of setting up a scholarship in honor of Gordon Parks. It's a really nice idea. And I would say that today, we are, you know, as opposed to 1993, we are much more conscious of the power dynamics at play in such an offer of a gift, and also much more conscious of the way in which, even just by accepting that, we are perpetuating them. Now, the truth is, the price for the photograph, the scholarship, anyway, the museum doesn't offer scholarships, but there may have been other ways of making a contribution. I would say now, for instance, if the similar circumstance were to emerge, I think we would think very carefully about, if the photographer, you know, refused or declined to be paid for something, first of all, making sure we understood why that circumstance was happening and what else could we do. So I think it would be handled quite differently today. And part of the reason I think of talking about it now is I had initially thought that it was sort of sweet that he had given it in honor of Edward Steichen, and I have since revised that position to think about more the inequity, actually, that gift represents. So it is troubling, but so much of what we're dealing with today is troubling, and the fact that it's troubling shouldn't stop us from talking about it. Then Neil Friedberg asked, did Parks have difficulty with Tchaikovsky? No, not that I'm aware of. Tchaikovsky had an exhibition. River or Tasha, can you remember what year the photo essay exhibition was? Was that in like 66, something like that? Tasha, do you remember anything about it?
It's not coming to mind right away, but I can look it up.
Okay.
Tasha's internet failed, so she'll.
Oh no! Okay,
shortly.
We'll bring Tasha back. But anyway, John Tchaikovsky organized an exhibition called the Photo Essay, I think around 66, and
1965.
Oh, 65. Okay, I was close. And Parks's work featured in that. So I would say it's probably representative of a bias against photographers who were working for the magazines, and a sense of a lack of urgency for acquiring work. You know, John Tchaikovsky did many, many great things in his career as a curator, but the truth was that acquiring photographs was just a low priority. They weren't worth a lot, any of them. And we grappled with this when we worked on a project on the 50th anniversary of New Documents, which was the show that Tchaikovsky organized in 67. And we had a tiny, tiny fraction of the photographs that were in that show. And it was because the important part then was to do a show. There was no catalog. Most of the works were not acquired. And that was
internet.
Hi, do we have, Lila?
Yes, you do.
Hi, would you like to ask a question? I'm turning on a little fan, but I'm still listening. I can hear you. Lila, do you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share? Okay, River, take it away.
So it looks like Lila Stein actually chimed in the chat and says, I believe that the cropped picture of the hand made the picture so very dramatic and really touched me. So yeah, bringing up this point of course how cropping can shift the meaning of a photograph. Absolutely. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, the Harlem gang leader is one story that has been sort of called out and studied at greater length as one of these single project series with the Parks Foundation. So there's actually a book dedicated to thinking about the way in which the editors created an argument within the image story, this great mass of photographs that Parks made during the 6 weeks that he spent with Red Jackson, the young man who was the subject of the story. So thank you, Lila, for chiming in. And yes, here's one photograph from that series that is in the museum's collection. And I guess we would also note that though there aren't many works in the collection attributed to Park from before 1993, he was included in exhibitions at different points prior to that, including, of course, the photo essay exhibition in '65, but several exhibitions prior to that Steichen included him in as well.
Thank you, River. And thank you, Lila.
No, thank you. I enjoy it so much. Thank you.
All right, we're glad. So Jerry Lazar asks about the circumstances of the magazine project. Was it assigned, self-generated, any insight into the selection or editing process? And I will say most of Parks's stories for Life magazine were assigned. I think by 1957, they had a solid working relationship. So he would have certainly felt comfortable saying no thank you to any story he didn't want to do. So in that sense, what do I think? Maybe not self-generated, but responding to his own interest. He could pick and choose between them. The selection and editing process for the magazine really happened among the editors of Life magazine. The selection and editing of this book happened when, over many, many hours spent with all of the slides from the series that the Gordon Parks Foundation had gathered, and really thinking through which images were most compelling, and also how would we put them into a book where the various subsections of the book brought forward the different aspects of Parks's interests. So daytime, it's interesting how many of the crime pictures happened in the day, and how do those feel different from the night, those that were sort of establishing a mood for the pictures, as opposed to how he looks at police work, how he looks at the people accused of crimes. And so we wanted, and then the book ends with pictures that Parks made in Alcatraz and during an execution that he witnessed that really was a moment of real trauma, I would say, for Parks, and was so traumatic, in fact, that there is not a single retrospective consideration of Parks's work, either in any of his written autobiographies, or in any retrospective consideration that doesn't have a significant amount of space dedicated to that experience of witnessing an execution. So I hope that gives a little bit of a texture to the idea of how this came about, the book and the Life magazine article. Kathleen Herzaya writes, "Hi Sarah, it'd be great to know more about the consequences of Parks' series." Well, River, I welcome you trying to do. It is not always easy to understand how a series shapes public opinion. And certainly one of the things that we're grappling with now is knowing that this was laid out so clearly, so persuasively in 1957. Did it not have a recognizable impact on views of crime and criminality? How could we still be in a place where these stereotypes, where the inequitable force of law enforcement on criminals is still such a problem? And I would say that is maybe, it is not always possible to trace, I guess, but that impossibility of tracing it doesn't mean, it's not to say a double negative. It doesn't mean that the work didn't have an impact then. For all we know, thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people seeing this photo story could have had their prejudices and their assumptions shaken and shaped by what they saw, which was definitely true in Life magazine. At the same time, there may not have been a sufficiently fertile ground for us as a country to make the kind of tangible progress that Parks certainly would have wanted to see. You know, he described his camera as his weapon of choice against inequality, against injustice, against discrimination. And he, throughout his career, not only in this story, really worked to use his camera to draw attention to these causes, to the economic and social circumstances that surrounded segregation and discrimination, and to support the civil rights movement. And so the consequences, they may not be as, hi Tasha, they may not be as tangible as we wish, but that doesn't mean that they didn't exist. River, can you see the Q&A?
Yeah, so it looks like Charlotte Yonga is ready to ask a question. If you want to go ahead, you can unmute Charlotte.
Or maybe you
Can
are.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Thank you to I should put the camera on.
No, it's okay. I think that's
okay.
because it's a webinar. I'm not sure that's
okay.
possible.
Okay, nice. I just wanted you to define the meaning of. I'm French, sorry, so I try to understand everything. But the word inability. I don't remember. You know what I mean?
Ambiguity?
No.
No.
About the feelings of the photographer during the way he shoots, and maybe the emotion he feels when he shoots a scene. Not ambience, but
atmosphere.
Not with the feeling, like the
ambivalence.
Not the ambivalence. It's maybe empathy, but more complex. No, you don't have any other words?
Actually, it's true. Yes, if you want to try to say it in French, we could do a little crowdsourcing. You want to try to say it in French, or were you trying? You heard us say a word in English.
I don't have it in French.
Okay.
So I try to find the word, the meaning of the feeling you have when you shoot a scene, and the fact is, I wonder if when you feel something in your body, like the feelings in your stomach, your hand, or when you shake, like I am right now, is the image can be affected by those influence? That's my question.
I think I understand what you're saying, because I think what you're saying is, could your sense of empathy, or could your sense of identification,
emotion, empathy, or
I'm not sure I know what the word is, but I'll say this. I think that is a really interesting observation about how, if you are trembling with emotion,
the tensions,
if you're trembling with emotion in the face of what you're confronting, so you're in a circumstance and you're either empathizing or feeling, anticipating the feelings of somebody who's before your camera, and
that's it.
Grappling with that in such a way, that actually could explain some of what we were talking about, that we had called it ambient light, or thinking about the low light circumstances, and how that brought a sense of grain. But actually,
and the way you can see the light too, because I feel that when you are upset or when you are happy, you don't see the light, the same intensity of light and of colors. That's my feeling, actually, because
I think it's actually a really great observation, because what it does is it brings forward what Parks may have been feeling when he made those photographs, and thinking about how that can have an impact on the very way in which the images are registered, and that it's not just technical, but it's also human.
More emotional, maybe. Even the technique, you don't have the same how can I say, control of the technique when you are very under emotions and under tensions. I do photography, I do film photography, and when I'm very stressed or because I under pressure, because this is a big work, or because the model, I love the model in a way, I don't feel the same, and I feel that even my settings are different, because concentration. I don't know how to say them.
Right.
Yeah,
If your agitation or it can make it. I think it's an incredible observation. And unfortunately, I wish I had talked to you when I was writing my essay, because I would have liked to include that. But I think it's a really, and also what I love is everyone chiming in on the chat. I don't know if when you leave it, I love actually seeing what everyone else is hearing and projecting in this as well, because
actually I have like bipolarist troubles.
You have what?
Bipolaristic, I don't know how to say.
Bipolar. Yeah.
Bipolar, yes. I have troubles, and I can see that the colors are not bipolarity. Yes, I can feel the difference of the colors, and like your shirt is very much more vibrant when I feel good. It's not the same intensity of colors, and I was wondering if the film could catch this sensitivity.
Is that your baby?
Yeah, with me, my 3 month
how
baby.
old?
And this is a rainbow too in my life. So.
That sounds. How old is the baby?
3 months. Yes, he's called Azu.
Azu.
A-Z-U. A-Z-U. Azu.
Azu.
Yes, like Azu, like the director of the Lagos Photo Festival.
Yeah, I know Azu.
Yeah. Yes, the same name. Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for your observations. I think you really brought a new dimension to the work that I hadn't been anticipating. And so thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
There are a lot of other questions.
Yes. I have to take care of him. I'm sorry, I have to take care of my baby.
Okay, à bientôt. À bientôt. À la prochaine fois.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir, Sarah.
Au revoir. Oh my gosh.
So maybe I'll
yeah, go ahead, River. Go ahead.
Barbara Boward in the Q&A is asking, how did this choice of topic by Life magazine fit into the events of the time? For example, in 1955 with the murder of Emmett Till in Mississippi, with the story that Emmett Till's mother chose to run in Jet and Look magazine. Yeah. I believe it was Jet and not Look, but either way. And I think this is a really powerful question in terms of also speaking to, what are the consequences of this story? Because it prompts us to think about, what is the role of images in the world, both in terms of how they're made, potentially, as our caller was just queuing in to speak about this, the emotional impact of the photographer as having an affective relation to the world that's quite subjective, right? That's channeled through one's own experience, but also how photographs function once they're out in the world and what sort of affective pull they can have on a viewer. And one role that images can have, of course, is to sort of be a visual testament, to testify to an experience. And I think one role that the photographs of Black Death, in the case of Emmett Till, in the case of George Floyd more recently, can have is to be a sort of galvanizing force, and we can think about this photo story within that realm of experience, right? There are moments of violent contact between police and a perceived criminal. Nicole Fleetwood calls out one in particular in her essay, thinking about that scene in the hallway, but also the more subtle forms of violence in terms of the proximity of an officer to an individual in a scene of arrest, or the detective's raiding, so this moment of violent impact puncturing the private scene of a home. So those are just sort of some of the things that come to mind in terms of thinking about this particular story within a longer trajectory of picturing of anti-Black violence and racism.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to answer also Marianne Watson's because she asked about this picture from the New York Times article. And it actually was, and then she later corrected herself to acknowledge that it was from the Atlantic, which it was. And I think she meant, oh, this one here of the view from above where you have the car and her dress and the shirts are all of this sort of, you know, sequence of blue forms. And I would say, you know, it is a very powerful picture. It points to that idea of preserving, you know, there are many ways that this could have been captured. Now, it was unfolding in real time. It was not staged. So Parks was certainly up viewing it from a window from up above. But I think that one of the reasons he probably liked it had to do with the fact that he was able to show her surrounded by these police officers without giving up anything of her. You know, she was represented in this sea of, you know, 3 officers standing around her. And she was, you know, she's just standing there holding her arms up like this, you know, and so it becomes very ambiguous to us as viewers. I will say also, it points to that sort of suite of blue forms, the car, their shirts, her dress, points to something we haven't talked about that much, and that is Parks's aesthetic skill, you know, his skills as a photographer. Even when the editors might crop his pictures, but especially when they didn't, we see how skillfully he brought together the elements of a picture, how he understood just where to position himself and his camera in order to pull forward aesthetic and compositional components. He knew, obviously, when he was having color film in his camera, that certain kinds of pictures were going to be more effective. When he wasn't working in color, you see different strategies at play. And I say this not to diminish from the social and the very clear insight that he brings to what he's photographing, but also his understanding that to make memorable pictures, you could more often get somebody to pause and really grapple with what they were looking at when it worked as a picture. So there was nothing haphazard about the blur. And now even, I think that even more so after Charlotte's comment about how being wrapped up and really empathizing with the intensity of what was happening in front of his camera could have had an impact on that. But he also understood and he used his incredible talents as a photographer to make compelling images. And so I think, you know, if I'm allowed to answer that as like a both and, a both and, I think, and maybe this is a good moment. Gerardo Rojas wrote a question about what would be the relevance from MoMA's point of view as an institution to revisit the work of Mr. Parks in the current contexts. And and maybe if you don't mind, I sort of deflect that question a little bit. I think the relevance is evident. It is of deep interest to my colleagues, to me, to use the museum collection as a catalyst for thinking about art and our contemporary moment. And this can mean historic achievements or more recent ones. But since the museum reopened in October, we are deeply committed to using the collection to helping us think through as a society these issues that mattered to artists then and that matter to us today. And so once, you know, I would say, you know, River and I have had the pleasure of thinking about how this acquisition can be integrated into the tapestry of stories that we tell in our collection galleries, and to think through not just how do we foreground Parks's achievement, but how by putting forward this group of photographs that are all in color, that have this incredibly, that have these aesthetic that work on so many levels, and how can we set those up in contradistinction to, for instance, a 19th century mugshot, where the purported clarity of the representation is paramount, and where, although even then, River and I love, it's like the mugshots are meant to be absolute identifiers of criminals so that you could recognize criminal types. And yet even police, law enforcement in the 19th century understood how much those images with perfect clarity and, the frontal view, the side view, how those also failed to give enough information. But wouldn't it be interesting today to think about Parks's work both looking back and looking forward? And another thing that we're bringing into the galleries is a clip from a film that Gordon Parks shot directed actually, in 1971 called Shaft. And Shaft really, by including a clip of that in the galleries, what we hope to be doing is helping viewers appreciate how Parks's own thinking about crime and criminality evolved in the decade and a half between the Life story in 1971, and specifically how in that he is actively inverting the predominant white assumptions that the criminals were Black and that the good guys were white, because Shaft is definitely a hero to end all heroes. You can't help but watch the movie and feel like the world would be a better place if we had him protecting us, and he is an African American, and that was a big shift in mainstream filmmaking in the United States in the early 70s, and Parks deserves a lot of credit for that. So the relevance, gosh, that was a long answer, but the relevance is that the museum is very deeply committed to using works of art in our collection to think through issues that are important today. And we felt this 9 months ago, or long ago, when we decided that this was going to be the theme of this gallery. And of course, we feel it even more powerfully today. But it's not a new impulse for us.
Yeah. I think we might have time for one more question. Sure. And Svetlana Volter is ready with a question. Sure. If you want to unmute.
Oh, great. Can you hear us, Svetlana? Try talking and we'll try to hear you. I'm optimistic. Ken wrote that he has a translation of the Spanish article, Would I Like a Copy? If you don't mind adding that to Sarah's forum, I'm sure it's better than my Google Translate version of it. So yeah, yes, please, if possible, but not if it's too much trouble. Okay, Svetlana, are you in? Okay. Laura Becker asked, how spontaneous were the photos of Gordon Parks? How many were posed? And I think I'll just try to go through. It's Svetlana, by the way, as soon as you want to be unmuted, just chime on in and I'll stop what I'm saying. Laura Becker asked, how spontaneous were the photos? How many were posed? I would say the images of the heroin, the man shooting up heroin, those are the only ones that I know were posed in any traditional sense of the word. The rest of them, Parks and a reporter were following these detectives in various cities around the United States, in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. So most of them were quite spontaneous. And again, what I had been interpreting to be the use of available light, the kind of reticence to assert himself, to dramatically into the scene, but merely to bear witness to what was unfolding before him, even though that's been shifted today, and I'm grateful for that shift. That is a gesture toward the spontaneity, I think, of the images. Okay. River, is there one or two more questions that you want to try to answer? We have 1 or 2 more minutes. So since we're
sure, yeah. So there's one comment from Karen Lindsay that says the color photos are so cinematic. So nice you'll have the film in the exhibition. And absolutely, we're really excited about that conversation across Park's work and be able to sort of, you know, foreground those relationships across his career. He was, I think Sarah just said this, but he also broke the color line, so to speak, in the film industry as the first Black director when he directed The Learning Tree some years just prior to Shaft. And then, of course, 1971, Shaft sort of becomes a genre-bending blockbuster success that really sparks or is a catalyst for what we come to know as Blaxploitation cinema. So yeah, sharing that excerpt felt important to us and exciting as well.
Maybe, River, we'll finish with Diane Boucher's comment, which was a question that she was actually at the University of Virginia Art Museum in 2014 when there was an exhibition of Red Jackson's Life magazine photo essay there. And she recalls that Parks at the time was concerned that the text written by Life's editors put too much emphasis on violence rather than his original intention, which was to encourage government and social services to look at the problems facing a young man like Red Jackson. And then she asks, did he have a similar problem with the 1957 text? And I really want to conclude with this because first of all, it's a terrific question that reminds us that there are 2 ways in which the editor's hand is at play in a Life magazine essay. One is cropping, and we've talked quite a bit about that. But certainly the writing is another very important part of it. And yes, you're absolutely right that the Harlem gang leader, Parks, was particularly upset with the way in which the Life editors dramatized the violence. And there was another question about how much Parks might have felt comfortable actually even speaking up to the white editors of Life magazine. And it's definitely possible in 1948, as he was just getting his footing there as a staff photographer, that he may have felt less comfortable making sure that his pictures were accompanied by words that amplified as opposed to, really diminished their meaning or his intent. And I would say I am not aware of a similar problem with the 1957 text. When you read the text carefully, although I think different people might respond differently, one of the things that I really love about this series of books is that the articles from Life magazine are reproduced in their entirety at a scale when you really can dig in and understand the arguments. And I think that these editors were really grappling with what was perceived to be a crime wave in the US, but the editors were really questioning the methods by which crime was being tabulated and really pointing to the flaws in that understanding. And so I would say, just in the same way that Parks's photographs might have destabilized or challenged the expectations of the predominantly white readers of Life magazine, I think that the article that accompanied this went a long way to try to do a similar but distinct thing with words. So I'm not aware that Parks had a similar problem with this photo story, but it's a great question. Can I just say how great it has been to see so many people joining Tasha and River and me today. It's really, thank you all. We really appreciate your active participation in all of our seeing through photographs activations. We are going to continue them, even if on a slightly reduced time frame, to give me a little more time to work on things related to the Gordon Parks installation and others. You are part of my day job. There are other things that I also have to do, but thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our incredible education team, to Kelly, to Sarah, to Adelia. Thank you to the AV team, to Steve, to, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the, Evelyn, sorry.
And
Steve,
Travis.
Evelyn, and Travis. Sorry, Evelyn. So anyway, thank you all, but especially thank you to the Seeing Through Photographs learners. You really make us feel like every ounce of effort that we put into this course feels worthwhile and meaningful to us. So thank you, and we hope that you'll be a part of the conversations going forward. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer absolutely everything today, but we're going to keep trying. All right. Thanks so much.